Welcome back to Boxing with Mannix and Mora, and I'm going to change up the intro here, Sergio. The award-winning Boxing with Mannix and Mora podcast. We finished in third place for the best combat sports podcast in the Sports Podcast Awards. We both probably want first. Shout out to the award winners in the best combat sports category, but third place I'll take. We've only been kind of in existence as a two-man show for 6-7 months. I'll take third place. Bronze medal, I'll take it.
See, Chris Mannix, you come from the era where you're proud of participation trophies.
Okay.
I come from winning championships.
Never been proud of participation
I
trophies.
come from winning. I come from winning gold.
You won one time.
Second sucks, and third is even worse. So you may be happy, but I'm disappointed. There's always next year.
It's not a participation trophy. It's the bronze medal, third place in the best combat sports podcast, which for a podcast that's been in existence for a small time, I will take it. All right, so we got a lot to get in on this sort of award-winning show. I want to talk about the big fight we had this weekend, David Benavidez taking on David-Morrell. We've got a good fight in the undercard, a rematch between Stephen Fulton and Figueroa. We are both going to be in Flint, Michigan on Sunday. Big Sunday night show with Claressa Shields. We'll get into that. And also Canelo Alvarez whittling down his list of opponents for his upcoming May fight, the fight that will precede the expected fight against Terrence Crawford. But I can ask you first, Sergio, were you fooled by the social media post that Jake Paul put up where it looked like to a lot of people that he was going to fight his brother? Jake Paul is not going to fight Logan Paul on March 27th. It is going to be some kind of reality series on HBO Max. But there were a lot of people fooled by this and thought that the Paul brothers were going to get into the ring where you wanted them.
In order to be fooled, you have to be invested or care. I don't give a shit about them too. So no, I wasn't fooled at all.
You saw it though.
I saw it in my social media feed, and as soon as I saw it, I just, okay, they're doing something again to gather people's attention, but I don't care about it. Yeah, whatever. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of them at all. Zero. You know what?
It was a nice little bit of promotion, though. They got a lot of people talking about them potentially fighting.
Listen, I tell you all the time, Mannix. They're master promoters, and they found a niche, and they're exploiting it, and they're fooling people like you, not me.
It didn't fool me. I knew, like, even if you didn't know it was a reality series, March 27th is a Thursday. It's also smack dab in the middle of the NCAA tournament, which airs on Warner Brothers networks, which HBO Max is one of them. It was never going to be a fight, some kind of reality series. Fine, like, good. I think Jake Paul is going to be back pretty soon. I think he's going to have an announcement on that pretty quickly, but it's not going to be against his brother, Logan. It's not going to be against you either. On a serious note, before we start, Sergio, I want to say a word about Michael Katz, the longtime boxing writer who passed away this week. Katz spent more than 3 decades covering boxing for the New York Times and the New York Daily News. He later became one of the first boxing writers and arguably the most influential to embrace internet writing. He moved his work to House of Boxing, later to Max Boxing. Michael Katz was one of the reasons I really got to love boxing writing. When I first got into boxing, I go back and read a lot of his stories, his columns. He was a brilliant writer who did not back down from anyone. He had some legendary battles with Bob Arum over the years. That famous line, yesterday I was lying, today I was telling the truth.
That's his.
Bob said that in front of Michael Katz, and Michael Katz helped push it as a serious thing. You know, Bob insists when he said it at the time, he was drunk and just kidding in front of some reporters. Michael Katz really was the reason that quote was tattooed to Bob for decades. He really embodied what a boxing writer should be, and he'll be remembered as one of the greatest to ever do it. I know you are a fan of good writing, so I doubt you really interacted with Michael Katz. He came along.
I didn't.
You came along later.
The Max Boxing days, it was for me, Doug Fisher. Dougie Fisher was the one that I read. And yeah, Michael Katz was, I think, was before my time. But the name sounds familiar. But even though, rest in peace. Rest in peace if you had a footprint in boxing and in writing.
No question about that. All right, let's start with the big one this weekend. David Benavidez against David-Morrell. No title on the line, but this fight is way bigger than belts. Benavidez, a former 2-time super middleweight champion. Morrell, a decorated amateur who in his short pro career has won interim titles at 168 and 175. This is really going to be a fantastic fight on Saturday on pay-per-view. When you look at this fight, like, what is the most significant variable to you? What is the question mark out there that you want to see answered on fight night?
Well, normally for every fight, the question mark with undefeated fighters that aren't accustomed to get hit is how are they going to take a punch? How is their chin going to hold up? So that's one of them. The chin of Morrell, how's he going to react to the power of Benavidez, and technique. Technique is going to be, I think, even more important than punch resistance, because both these guys they're powerful fighters, they're aggressive fighters. They both come forward, and they're so evenly matched. This is going to be another thing. They're so evenly matched. The only difference is Morrell is more of a natural 175-pounder. Benavidez is more of a natural 168-pounder. But as far as height, they're evenly matched. I think Morrell's maybe 1 inch taller, 1 inch, 1 year younger, maybe a little longer.
They're right
reach.
around the same,
They
physically,
look
chronologically, everything.
They look ideally the same, and they fight aggressively the same as well. They both are front foot fighters, only the power comes differently. So I think like the key here is going to be technique and chin, like I said, and then add a third one there. It's going to be who's going to land their power? Is it going to be Benavidez with explosive, faster hands on the inside, or Morrell, who gets his power on the outside? He has the longer arms, and his power comes on the outside. So that's going to be the deciding factor. The key here is going to be, is Morrell going to get caught in exchanges with the faster, shorter combinations of Benavidez, or is Morrell going to catch him at the end of the long punches? That's going to be the key right there.
I think the activity and the work rate of Benavidez is a variable I'm looking for. I mean, in their last fight, where both made their debuts at light heavyweight, the punch output was largely the same. Benavidez threw 521 punches against Alexander Vostik. Dave Morrell threw 469 against Hot Rod Kalajic. So relatively close. When I look at these two guys, Morrell has the higher motor. Like, he is the guy that is most likely to throw a lot of punches. And I think that's going to come into play in the second half of this fight. And that's where my other variable comes in. Experience, right? Like, Morrell's had a long amateur career. We've loved what we've seen from him, but he's just 11-0. Like, David Benavidez is 29-0. And if you look at the resumes, Benavidez has been in the ring with the likes of Caleb Plant and Demetrius Andrade, a whole bunch of kind of BB plus level guys. The best opponent on Morrell's career, is it Yamaguchi Falcoa? Like, who, I don't know who the best guy would be that he's faced up until this point. So this is the kind of fight that I can see being really competitive early, maybe even a little cagey, because I think Benavidez has to be wary of that knockout power of Morrell. But when they get to the second half of the fight, I can see a scenario Benavidez just takes over. I think Morrell's tough, and I think he can hold up and go the distance. But I think Benavidez, that work rate is going to become really difficult for a inexperienced fighter at the pro level like Morrell to deal with.
And I totally agree with that. It's going to be a second half fight. The first half of the fight, both their power, both their aggression, they're going to have to respect each other. The second half of the fight is where they start getting a little bit more tired. Their conditioning becomes a factor, and then their technique starts to slowly break apart. So that's why I said, whoever has the better technique. I mean, that when you put the hierarchy in boxing of the sweet science, technique's number one. In any sport, technique over speed, over power, over IQ, over intelligence is technique. Are you doing it right? It starts from the bottom up. And the later this fight goes, when I watch David Morrell, his technique starts to crack because he overloads on every fucking punch. Every punch he tries to knock you out with. That's what makes him exciting. That's what makes him a knockout artist. But when you have that long of arms, that long of a reach, and then you start getting tired and your technique starts turning against you, it's the short, fast punches that are going to connect. And that's the reason I think Benavidez catching them in the inside in the second half of the fight. He's quicker with the shorter punches and the explosive punches on the inside. And I think with Morrell's aggression, and once he starts overloading on punches and missing and getting tired, that's when I think he's going to get caught with something sneaky on the inside, but it's going to be in the second half of the fight.
You know it's interesting is like neither one of these guys look great in their light heavyweight debuts. Both went the distance. Benavidez fought a former champion in Vostik, but you know, he was just coming off a long layoff, had a couple of wins.
Which I told you was going to happen. I told you this on Jabs. years ago. I said their power is not gonna travel to 175. Benavidez is not gonna look good. And you say he's been killing everybody, this, that, and sure enough, he struggled with Bostic. And I
It's
think
one fight though. Like one fight. And he did say afterwards that he hurt his hand.
same thing's gonna happen. His power he wasn't a huge power puncher at super middleweight.
You think Benavidez? You think Morrell's power carries to 175 because he went the distance with? But I'm talking about Morrell now. Morrell went the distance with Kalajic, and I thought that was a lot closer fight than the judges.
And Kalajic actually caught him on the inside with a couple of good shots. Also, that actually slowed Morrell's roll. No, but I think Morrell's a bigger puncher at 175. Yes. Okay. Because it's a different type of punch. He tries to catch you at the end of the punch where the power unleashes in the end, and he has those long arms. I think it's like 76-inch reach or more. And with Benavidez, he relies on explosive combinations on the in a little square right in front of you. It's like Diego Corrales, like he really doesn't wind up. It's ra-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, and it's really beautiful to watch when he gets it done. Morrell, he rotates his entire upper body and that wingspan, and he turns his shoulders. That is where he gets his power. Now that's a good part. The bad part is if he misses, that turns against him. Because then he falls into the trap of Benavidez's shorter, compact, faster punches. So it's going to be I think Morrell's going to be dangerous early, and Benavidez is going to be dangerous late.
So we'll do our full official predictions for the weekend on Friday. But right now, I'm going Benavidez by decision. What's your official pick?
Benavidez late knockout.
You think he stops him?
I think he stops him. I think he gets caught.
You just said that Benavidez's power doesn't carry it to 175.
Yeah, but when Morrell's that aggressive, going for a knockout every single round, every punch is a knockout punch. He doesn't hide his power. So because of that, he's going to get caught coming in aggressively, and I think Benavidez catches him.
Yeah, I was reading some of the media predictions, and it's overwhelmingly in favor of Benavidez.
By knockout or decision?
A little bit of both. Late stoppage, kind of what you said. I think a lot of people do believe that Morrell can go the distance, but overwhelmingly in favor of Benavidez. Lastly on this, I saw Benavidez say something interesting this week where, look, it's widely assumed that if he wins, then he will be next in line to fight the winner of Beterbiev against Bivol. He will be mandated to do that by the WBC, and it's also a natural fight to make. Turki Al-Sheikh loves David Benavidez as well. Benavidez also said that if he can't get that fight, he would be willing to move up to cruiserweight to take on Zurdo Ramirez at cruiserweight. I never really thought of that. I mean, I've thought of Benavidez kind of jumping up in the future, but in his, say, next fight, jumping up and taking on Zurdo, like Zurdo wants to fight for belts. I get that, but a Benavidez fight domestically is a much bigger fight for Zurdo than Jaya Pataya is.
Oh man, you could sell that easily. I mean, the first Mexican cruiserweight champion against the Mexican monster. Speed versus size. Yeah, sign me up. I never even thought about that matchup. That's a brilliant matchup. That's a matchup that's a pay-per-view matchup.
Oh, no question.
I would love that fight. Yeah, never even thought about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Bring it on. But first he has to get past Morrell. I think Morrell's going to be dangerous. But
yeah. It's a very tough fight.
Type of fight where both of them get hurt. And like I said, it comes down to technique and chin. Who's going to take a better punch? That's another thing. I've seen Benavidez get hit. I've seen Morrell get hit as well, but you mentioned his resume and his opposition, not as good as Benavidez. So I just think if Morrell gets hit by a big puncher on the championship level against Benavidez and his legs quiver or shake a little bit, it ain't even going to reach the second half of the fight.
Yeah. I know Benavidez has long wanted to fight Canelo, and he keeps getting asked about Canelo in these interviews. But for Benavidez, like, this is now kind of an 18-month sweet spot where you can get some really big fights. Like, getting the winner of Beterbiev Bivol is a huge fight. Potentially getting a Zurdo Ramirez fight is a huge fight, huge payday. These are legacy fights that he doesn't really have to worry about Canelo, moving forward. On the undercard of this event, we've got a great fight. Stephen Fulton and Brandon Figueroa. This is a rematch, Sergio, of what was a highly competitive fight at 122 back in 2021. Since then, Stephen Fulton has gone 2-1. He beat Daniel Roman and Carlos Castro, which sandwiched a knockout loss to Naoya Inoue. Figueroa since then is 3-0. He also beat Castro along with former title holders Mark Magsayo and Jesse Magdaleno. So, this was really competitive the first time around. Are you expecting anything different in the rematch?
No, it's going to look exactly the same. And the reason it looks exactly the same is because Figueroa doesn't know any different. He is a pressure fighter. He is a slow, plodding type fighter with his feet, but he's aggressive with his upper body. He switches stands. He fights squared up a lot. he has so many flaws. It's amazing he's gotten this far, not getting chin checked, not getting knocked out, or not getting, people taking advantage of his where he falls back on. But the reason he does that is because he's young. He's very tall for that weight. He has a long reach, and he's aggressive. He does everything the opposite of what his body frame demands of him. So guys you're not accustomed to fighting guys like that. So anyone that faces Fulton, you expect, okay, he's long, he's rangy, he's strong, he throws a lot of punches, he's a volume guy, he attacks the body, but he fights like a short man and he's a tall man. That's what makes him an anomaly and difficult to train for. That's one. Two, I would love to fight a fighter like that. I would love to face an aggressive, tall fighter with slow feet and bad technique that squares up. So I think Fulton's going to do better the second time around, because Fulton was landing really good uppercuts, but that wasn't his MO. He needs to just concentrate on uppercuts and concentrate on body shots. When you have a tall, long, rangy puncher that squares up and doesn't use his height, man, you can fight as a smaller man on the inside. You don't even have to move that much. You have the faster hands, and just light him up with uppercuts anytime he squares up in front of you. Light him up with body shots every time he squares up on you. The target is right there. He's not turning sideways and really using his reach or using his height. He literally fights smaller than his smaller opponents. He's baiting you to land those uppercuts. So I just think with a better game plan, Fulton lights him up.
Yeah, Fulton's accuracy was the difference maker in the first fight. Figueroa was more active. Fulton, though, was more accurate, and that allowed him to squeeze out that decision. I agree mostly with what you're saying, but I do wonder how much has been taken out of Fulton in the last couple of years. Like,
it wasn't a physical beating, the one he took against Figueroa.
No, but it was against Inoue.
Inoue, he got knocked out. That was
no, he didn't get knocked out the first round. Was it like 7-8? Like he took a beating over the course of that fight. That was a beating, and then he was
knockout. It wasn't a physical.
But
fight.
Sergio, then he took about a year off. Was frustrated by all that, and fought Carlos Castro and didn't look good in that fight. Got knocked down by Carlos Castro. This is the same guy that Fulton 3 fights earlier knocked out in their fight. Yeah. And I've watched some of these Fulton tapes, and look, Magsayo's not great, but he's a former title holder. Jesse Magdalena's not great, but he's an experienced guy. Like, Fulton has looked better than Figueroa Figueroa's looked better than Fulton over these last few fights. And based on what I saw against Carlos Castro, and maybe if you're Fulton, you're not up for it. It's like he didn't want to be on the prelims. He wanted to be the main event, or at least on the main card. You fighting a guy like Carlos Castro. It's your first fight at 126. Maybe you come back for this fight in much better shape and much more focused. But based on what I've seen over the last 3 fights, and the fact that I think Fulton, because of his size, is going to absorb those 4 pounds a little bit better, and his work rate is definitely higher. It's a close fight, but I'm going to this fight favoring Figueroa.
Work rate for Fulton? You think he should up his work rate?
No, his work rate is a difference maker. I'm saying that was his advantage in the first fight. Fulton's accuracy was
there you go. Accuracy. I don't think you should compete with the work rate of Figueroa. That's how you're going to end up getting. I'm surprised they didn't clash heads more. I'm surprised that they don't have a cut clashing heads, because Figueroa leads with his head a lot. He squares up a lot. He's so damn aggressive with bad technique. He has slow feet. I know it sounds like I'm tearing down Figueroa. Those are all the negatives. There's a lot of positives too. But you need to take advantage of guys like that. They make it easier for you. So I just think if Fulton doesn't concentrate on volume, you don't want to go punch for punch with a volume puncher. All right, that's the one thing you don't want to do. Fulton needs to fight in spots and move. Pick his counter shots and move. Don't stand in front of him. Stay off the ropes. He does that, he's gonna have a lot more success. You gotta use those slow plotting feet against him. So throw your uppercuts and then get on an angle, push him back, then start all over, rinse and repeat. You just got to have a game plan with guys like that. I love fighting guys like that. They're like Antonio Margarito type. Yes, they're dangerous if you're not in shape. Yes, they're dangerous if you stand in front of them, if you're against the ropes. But if you come with a game plan, man, you light those guys up with speed, with angles, with footwork, and jabs. Basic ABCs of boxing. And I just think that's what Fulton needs to come to the table with strategy in this time around.
So that performance by Fulton that we saw ringside against Carlos Castro was just this past September, the Canelo undercard. That didn't concern you at all going into this fight, the way he fought?
Yeah, I mean, it concerns you, but then it's Carlos Castro. I mean, some guys don't get up for guys like that.
Well, Figueroa did. Figueroa knocked him out.
Figueroa style is it's a basic style. I mean, he fights one way. Fulton has, he has a different way. He can box. He could be explosive. He can fight on the inside. Figueroa has one gear, and that gear is just come forward and throw a bunch of shots. I'm going to overwhelm you with a hurricane of punches. And with that style, it's going to work with boxers, with punchers, with movers, with anyone. That's his MO. Aggression. I'm coming at you.
All right, I'm taking Figueroa by knockout in this fight. I think he gets it done. Well, look, I know Figueroa is not Inoue, but Inoue stopped Fulton. Carlos Castro knocked down and hurt Fulton. I think at 126, Figueroa is going to have a clean victory this time around. I take it you're going the other direction.
No, I think Fulton should win. I think it's going to be a competitive fight. It's going to look similar to the first one. I think it was a decision, similar, hard to score type fight.
All right. So who are you taking?
Fulton this time around.
Fulton won the first time around too.
Yeah, but a lot of people thought Figueroa won.
That was a close fight. So there are actually 2 fight cards this weekend. On Sunday, as I mentioned, you and I will be in Flint, Michigan. Your first trip to Flint. I've been there a couple of times.
I've been in Marquette, Michigan.
That's not the same thing. We'll be there for a show headlined by Claressa Shields, who will attempt to fully unify her 3rd weight class when she takes on Danielle Perkins for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. Look, Claressa Shields is the GOAT. She is by far and away the best woman at any weight above 147 pounds. Probably the best one above any weight above 140, because that's the only time you get there is down to the Katie Taylor territory. But she's won titles at 54, 60, 68, 75, and now going for all the belts at heavyweight. Danielle Perkins is 5-0. Let's just be real about it. She's 5-0.
5-0 fighting for the heavyweight championship of women's boxing. Yeah.
Is this, in your mind, is this the best that Claressa Shields could do?
Yes.
Is this just kind of where we're at with Claressa Shields?
Yes. And sadly, all those accolades you just mentioned about Claressa Shields, she's an incredible talent. She's a self-proclaimed GOAT. And I think she's one of the greatest female fighters of all time, but she's in a division where there's not much talent. I know I say this all the time. And
I think there's fewer than 20 fighters at heavyweight.
And this continues to prove it. She's fighting for the heavyweight. She's defending her heavyweight championship of the world against a 5-0 fighter in Perkins. 5-0, man. So you're telling me you couldn't find another, credible, heavyweight?
I mean, the short answer is no.
No. So that's my point.
There are a couple of women out there. Hannah Gabriels is someone she could have fought. There's a woman, I believe, in New Zealand. I'm blanking on her name.
This is the problem with Claressa Shields. She's basically, and I say it all the time, she's a big fish in a small pound of talent, and she won a heavyweight title at 170 something pounds. These women aren't that, there's not that many talent. The higher you go in class, the less talent you're going to find in women's boxing. That's the problem with Claressa Shields. And the problem with that is that people really don't tune in to see greatness. They tune in to see that can Claressa Shields do something great again? Can she become historic again? Can she do this? So we're watching Claressa Shields, but we're not actually paying attention to her opponent. Can you remember who she won the heavyweight championship?
Yeah,
against?
Vanessa Lepage.
Okay, but I heard in between there.
No, I remember because I've been doing my homework prepping for the show.
Yeah, well, it's forgettable to a lot of people, and it's because people don't watch women's boxing north of 160 pounds. That's just the way it is. So Claressa Shields is just going to have a lot of issues. Now, if Shields was knocking out fighters, then you're forced to look in her direction.
Well, she did that last time around. She picked up a 2nd round knockout, which is that's what you have to do in a situation like this.
Right.
Like I'm with you to an extent. Like this is just what it is. Like if you're Claressa and you're looking around at all these weights between 54 and heavyweight, where are your best options, right? Like Savannah Marshall has made it clear that she's not looking for a rematch in boxing right now. There's some PFL talk, but Claressa wants to see that fight happen in the ring. Franchon Cruz-Dezurn, maybe you can make that happen later, but there's not this huge, not a huge push to get Shields-Dezurn too. Shadacia Green would have been more interesting if she had beaten Cruz-Dezurn, but she lost that fight, and she's been trying to build her way back. ever since.
Savannah Marshall is the only one that makes sense. She has one opponent, and she's already beaten that one opponent, and she has to go back and face her again, and probably has to be in the UK again, but you probably have to play Claressa Shields way more money to get it done, and you probably have to pay Marshall a lot more money to stay out of PFL and stick to boxing. It's just a lot of moving parts. That's not going to happen. Promoter's headache. So Claressa Shields, to answer your question, and you haven't even asked me that question, she's stuck. She's stuck with one opponent, and that one opponent's going in a different direction. So the GOAT, the self-proclaimed GOAT, is she's in a bad spot with no opponents.
She's in a bad spot right now, and I don't blame her for taking this Perkins fight, and good on Dimitri Salita and Mark Taffet for, kind of sprucing it up a little bit by making it for the undisputed heavyweight championship. All right. So like you're crowning an undisputed women's heavyweight champion months after we crowned an undisputed heavyweight champion with Usyk back in the first fight with Fury. So there's that. I think for Claressa Shields, what it's going to come down to is how low can she go? Like, how light can she get? Because if she can consistently still make 154 pounds, that opens up several different types of opponents. Like, I've said this before. I would love to see Claressa Shields and Michaela Mayer fight. They are two former Olympic teammates who have been friends, friendly, however you want to define it over the years. And two of the bigger names in women's boxing. Michaela Mayer is going to fight Sandy Ryan on March 29th. If Michaela Mayer beats Sandy at 147, she should immediately call out Claressa Shields.
I agree.
Like, she should say, I'll move up to 54. Claressa moves down, because that's a big fight. Like, you can make that fight in Vegas. You could make it in Detroit. You could make it a few different places, and you could both make some good money off that. That's number one. The other thing was, like, I've heard Claressa the last couple of weeks calling out Amanda Serrano at 147, right? Like, we haven't seen Claressa at 147. I don't know that she can make that at this point. If she could, and if Serrano wanted to go all the way up to 47, that's an interesting fight. That's a very, very interesting
that's
fight.
way too much size. Michaela Mayer makes all the sense.
Way too much size for who?
For Serrano. For Mayer, I think it's perfect for her, because Mayer is a tall fighter. She has wide shoulders. She could put on the right kind of muscle and the right kind of weight. I think that's a great fight. They're both Olympians. And like I tell you all the time, Mannix, ethnicity sells. When you have a Mexican fighter versus a black fighter, it sells more than black versus black or Mexican versus Mexican. So there you have it. You have a Caucasian woman, an Olympian, versus the GOAT, an African-American woman from two total parts of the country. They're both American. That's your sell right there. That's your promotion. And they're both Olympians. They both represented this great country. Man, that's the fight right there. And it won't be a mismatch like it will if she's, aiming to fight lighter fighters like Serrano or even I heard her say something about Baumgartner. Too small, too lean, too small. Claressa Shields she's a big fighter, and she could put on weight on that body. So I think Mayer could do it successfully, and Claressa could come down to 165 in a healthy manner. I think there's your fight. There's your
54, you mean? Yeah.
I think it'll be in the 60s.
Against Mayer? No, it's 54. I mean, Mayer started her career at 130.
I don't think Shields will be going down north of 160.
She's got to go down. It doesn't make any sense.
There has to be a catch weight. I wouldn't do it.
Claressa's the one saying she can make 54 for the right fight. So if she can make it and Michaela goes up in weight.
Fighters say they can do that, and then they blame it on their bad performance on making that weight.
I mean, tough. Like, if you're asking a fighter like Michaela Mayer, who's only had, 2 fights at welterweight, to move up to 160 after that, I think that's asking a little bit too much. Claressa has been the undisputed champion very recently at 154 pounds. I don't think it should be that big an issue to go back down to that weight.
It's gonna affect the bigger fighter coming down than the lighter fighter coming up. So I think there can be stipulations. There can be a rehydration clause. There can be a lot of things, to make that fight happen.
Either way, it's the fight that probably needs to happen. Like, I know Michaela's going to look to fight someone like, Natasha Jonas, try to unify the belts at 147. But I think the biggest U.S. fight she could make is against Claressa Shields, and it's the same for Claressa as well. I want to talk for a minute about Canelo Alvarez, who we believe is headed for a showdown against Terrence Crawford in September of this year. But Canelo is planning to fight in one fight before that. Eddie Reynoso, his trainer and manager, he came out and told Box Azteca that William Skull who has one piece of the light heavyweight crown, and Christian Mbili, who is a top contender at 168, are both options for Canelo in May. If you're Canelo Alvarez, Sergio, which of those two would you take?
Pues te voy a decir que si yo soy Saúl Canelo Álvarez, voy a escoger el Skull, el William Skull, y
This
le voy
is
a dar
an
una
English
pinche chinga.
podcast, Sergio.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, if I'm Saúl Canelo Alvarez, I'm going to go with William Skull. I mean, that's the easier fight, the more marketable fight. He has the title, and the fact that he's undefeated, right? Skull's undefeated, isn't he?
Skull is still undefeated. He is incredibly untested outside of that one fight against Vladimir Shishkin.
See, why you got to go to the negative side, Mr. Pessimistic? Let's stick to the positives. Okay. He has a weight.
And Billy's undefeated too.
Yeah, but that's a more dangerous fight.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point.
That's a more dangerous fight. So I just think, this is going to be his Abney Yildirim type fight, where he faces a guy that he can beat. It's going to be an in-between fight. There's not going to be a lot of threat to him to get physically, in any danger. It's going to be William Skull next. I could already see it.
Yeah, I think Skull makes the most sense for a lot of reasons. One, he's not remotely dangerous. I remember where I was watching that Skull Shishkin fight. It was actually on my honeymoon. I was watching the Skull Shishkin fight, and it was painful, man. It was painful.
How was the fight, by the way?
Good one. The Skull Shishkin fight was brutal. It was a brutal fight. And Shishkin can make an argument that he won that fight, but Skull got the decision, and now he's got that piece of hardware around his waist, which is the valuable commodity in all this. Not only is Skull an easy opponent, but if Canelo can take back that IBF title, then he's undisputed once again, and it makes the Crawford fight that much more interesting. Crawford's chance to become the first ever male boxer to go undisputed in 3 separate weight classes. I mean, that would be a feather in his cap. Like, if he can take on Canelo and take out Canelo, and that's a separate conversation, and become undisputed, pretty impressive performance thing to have if you're Terence Crawford. Like Christian Mbili didn't look great in his last time out against Sergey Derevyanchenko, but Mbili he's a dangerous offensive fighter. Like, he is a very, very good fighter, and I wouldn't risk an Mbili fight with no reward attached to it. Like, there's no belt there. It's just a title defense if you're Canelo. Like, take on William Skull, take whatever payday that you're going to get from PBC or Matchroom or Riyadh Season, whoever winds up putting on foot in the bill for that show, get your belt back and move on to the big one. That's another one of those fights where it's like, as long as the Terence Crawford fight is locked in, you don't want to take a big chance if you're Canelo with someone that could be dangerous like Mbili.
I agree. And then Mbili, for the record, I don't think he's a killer. I just think he's a strong, aggressive fighter, but he makes a lot of mistakes. I think Canelo would shine against Mbili, but it can be dangerous with headbutts. It could be dangerous with elbows. And Mbili will land some shots. And, Canelo's already, 65 plus fights in. He's been fighting for half his life. So, you can turn old overnight. And Mbili's a young, strong, determined, hungry fighter. So, yes, all that. But I'm not a big fan of Mbili's style. And I'm definitely not a fan of William Skull. Either of these guys.
You're not a skull head?
No, I am not a skull head.
I am.
Either of these fights, I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of for Canelo. But if it's an in-between fight for the Crawford mega fight, then I'm okay with it. I'm okay with superstars in this sport to actually, stay in between fight and in between payday. While you stay sharp. The last thing you want to do is be inactive, waiting for the big paydays, like a lot of stars do, and look like shit when they come back. So Canelo staying active against a William Skull, totally fine with it.
Not for nothing, but it was just like 2 weeks ago where you were arguing with me about Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney taking lesser fights when their mega fight is on the table for later in the year.
You got 2 young guys that are different. Canelo's long in the tooth. He has 60-something fights.
Yeah, the point is
professionally since he was 15 years old.
The point is you don't want to risk.
Give him a break, man.
Please stop talking like that. You continue. When you do that voice, you continue to sound like Cheech every single time. The point is you just want to get to that Crawford fight, just like with Ryan and Devin. You want to get them to the rematch between each other. All right. When we come back, we will take your questions from social media.